Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Today's webinar is Sick Pay Made Simple in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, and I'm going to be presenting and hosting the session today. I am also joined by my colleague Duncan, who's going to be on hand, ready to answer your questions throughout the session as well. And a little look at what we're going to cover in the session as well. So I will begin with an overview of statutory sick pay, a little bit about the qualifying conditions and entitlement and things as well. We'll then look at recording sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. There is a few ways that you can record sickness, so I'll be going over those different options. We'll then take a look at adjusting your employees' payments to accommodate for that statutory sick pay. So whether you're paying their full wage or whether you need to reduce certain payments and things to accommodate for it, we will look at those different options. Followed by a section on troubleshooting, so what to check if an issue arises with SSP. I do have some kind of top tips of where to check and hopefully get that sorted for you. And last but not least, we do have a short quiz at the end just to test the knowledge that you've learned throughout the session. I believe there's 4 questions, so not too long, but just a nice bit of fun to end the session. But without further ado, let's get started. So first of all, the introduction. So what is SSP? Well, this stands for statutory sick pay, and it's the minimum amount that you should pay to qualifying employees when they're off sick. It's paid to employees when they're ill and they're unable to come and work. But if you've got a company sick pay scheme, you might pay them a little bit more, which is something that we'll loop back to a little bit later. Now, the rate of statutory sick pay is a weekly rate of £116.75, which did increase at the beginning of this tax year, so in April. Now, this doesn't relate to the employee's payment frequency though, so weekly or monthly, fortnightly even. This is a weekly rate regardless. And this is for a period of incapacity for work for up to 28 weeks as well, so that is the entitlement. And there are some qualifying conditions that an employee must meet as well for statutory sick pay. So take a look at these. So employees must have an employment contract with you and also done some work under that contract as well. So if you've hired somebody new and they're ringing sick before they actually do any work for you, they don't meet that qualifying condition. They must have also been sick for 4 or more days in a row, and this includes non-working days. And this is known as a period of incapacity for work, or a PIW. So you will hear me say PIW a lot during this webinar. It just means period of incapacity for work. They also need to be earning an average of at least £123 per week. And that average is taken in the 8-week period prior to the first day of sickness, or it's taken from any periods they've worked if that's less than 8 weeks. And they also need to give you notice and proof of illness when needed as well. So what I mean by this is a sick note, fit note, statement of fitness to work, that could be the proof. If a sickness lasts 7 days or less, the employee can self-certify their sickness. But if it's more than 7 days, you can and should ask for proof of illness, which is a bit more of an official sick note. And we do have some more information linked at the bottom of this slide, just on eligibility, as well as what to do if your employee doesn't qualify for SSP. So this goes to the gov.uk website. But they are the qualifying conditions for SSP. And a few more general rules as well. So the SSP payment itself is only going to be for qualifying days. And what I mean by qualifying days is the employee's normal working days or contracted working days. So for me, for example, my contracted working days are Monday to Friday, which means that my qualifying days for SSP would be Monday to Friday. And as well, you would only pay SSP on the employee's normal pay date, so no need to change that up. And the first 3 qualifying days of the period of incapacity to work are known as waiting days, so no SSP is payable for these. So for example, the employee would go on sick, but the SSP wouldn't kick in until that 4th qualifying day of absence. Now the exception for this is known as a linked period. This is when there is a period of sickness with a gap of 8 weeks or less from the previous period of sickness. And this sickness itself, it doesn't need to be related to the previous one. As long as the gap is 8 weeks or less, they won't serve those 3 waiting days again for the new PIW, and the sick pay would instead kind of kick in and resume from that first qualifying day. But remember, the PIW would still need to be 4 days or more in order to qualify for SSP. So an example of this would be someone is off sick for 2 weeks, then 4 weeks later they're off again, but only for 2 days. So yes, it's within 8 weeks from the previous one, so it would be a linked period, but because this new sickness itself wasn't 4 days, it was only 2, it won't qualify for SSP to begin with. And you will see a little bit more about this when I do the demonstration in the programme, a couple more examples of this. But before I do go into the demo, I do want to talk about recording sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. So there are a few ways that you can record this in the programme, and it just depends on which way that you would prefer to do it. So you can either use the absence diary, which is found in the employee's record and the absence tab, or you can also find this in the SSP tab in Enter Payments. So that's the absence diary. And the other way is via the Quick SSP option. Now this is found in your payroll links or the employee tasks as well. And Quick SSP also has the option to print a report of the information that you've inputted to. So it's a good way just to keep record of any information that you've inputted for the employee going on sick. But regardless of which way you use, it will produce information that shows on the absence diary. And this is going to show in the form of various letters or symbols, and that just depends on what that date is in the diary. So I do want to go through these before we go into the demo, just so you know exactly what they are. So first letter is the letter X. Now this indicates a waiting day. So you'll remember me saying those first 3 qualifying days of sickness in a PIW is a waiting day. Now, lowercase means it's for the current period that hasn't yet been updated and paid, so you've not updated the records yet. But if it's a capital letter, that's for a historical period that you have already updated and paid. The next letter is a P, for this is going to be a paid SSP day. And the same goes with the lowercase being current, capital letter being historical and already paid. We've then got a dash or an equal sign, so this represents a non-qualifying day. So if an employee works Monday to Friday, you would see these symbols over the weekend as they aren't qualifying or working days. So for me, my weekends would have those symbols on. And we've then got the red letter A, so this represents sickness absence, which doesn't qualify for statutory sick pay. And the most common place that you'll see this is if you've entered any sickness which is less than 4 days. So less than 4 days in a row, so not quite long enough for it to qualify for SSP, and therefore hasn't formed a PIW. And last letter here today is W, so this is a day marked as SSP withheld. Now this normally would appear after the employees had all of that 28 weeks entitlement of SSP, so they've had that entitlement, they've already been paid SSP, and there's no more for them to have really. You do also have the option of entering SSP as withheld, but that's a little bit less common. So do keep an eye out for these letters and symbols in the demonstration. We should be able to see all of them with what we've got planned. And last little thing before the demo as well, to determine what qualifies as a qualifying day, you will also need to set up a working day pattern for your employee. And this means you'd be able to use it to record waiting days and paid SSP days. Now the working day pattern consists of N's and Q's, N meaning non-qualifying day, Q meaning qualifying. So the employees' waiting days and paid SSP days would only be recorded on the qualifying days, as per what their pattern says. And once the sickness is recorded, you can check it in Enter Payments, so you can see how much it's paying, how many weeks it's paying out as well. And from here, you can also edit, extend, or delete any current sickness if required. And something to remember with SSP, and actually with all statutory payments, is it's going to pay up to and including the process date. So it's only going to pay the employee what's calculated in the current pay period. Any of the days that fall after the process date would be paid in a future pay period. But that was a little bit of an insight into SSP, so what it is, qualifying conditions, and the options that you've got to record it in the programme as well. So what I'm going to do now is dive into a demo and we'll take a look at those options. So I'll turn my camera off and bring up Payroll. So I'm logged into Payroll here as the manager, and the first thing that I'm going to do is change my process date. So from my payroll tasks, I'm just going to go to change the process date. Now I run a monthly payroll and I pay on the last day of each month. So my next pay date is going to be the 30th of September. So this means that any sickness entries that I'm entering this pay period, up to and including the 30th of September, are going to be used in calculations for SSP. And I did mention there are a few ways to enter it, to enter the sickness. So first way I'm going to show you is using the absence diary. So if I highlight my first employee that I'm entering sickness for, open up the record and go to the absence tab. This is the absence diary. Now this is where I can enter sickness, which I'll show you very shortly. But before I do record any of those absence dates, I do need to go and set up this employee's working day pattern to determine those qualifying days. So from further information, I'll click on SSP. And I'm then going to go across to the qualifying days tab. Now there is already one in here as kind of default. This is probably the most common working day pattern. So this is a Monday to Friday working pattern. So we've got Sunday and Saturday as non-qualifying days. Then in the middle, you've got that Monday to Friday showing as qualifying. So if these are the employees' working days each week, it's going to repeat that weekly, starting from this pattern date. Now this date, it's not too important as long as it is in the past before the absence. And if the pattern isn't correct, you can use this drop down here to select an alternative pattern in this list. So quite a few options in there. But if you find that yours isn't in there, you can also click in the gap, kind of click in the space underneath here, and you are able to type in your own working pattern. So if you had someone who works shifts, for example, you can enter, a few weeks of shifts in here, for example. And if this is 3 weeks of shifts, it'll go through and repeat every 3 weeks. So you can really customize these depending on the employee. But as you can see, the working pattern can become quite complex. It does depend on the situation. Now, if your employee doesn't have set days at the work, maybe they're a casual worker, if that's the case, HMRC guidance does allow you and the employee to agree on a standard working pattern for the purposes of SSP. So you and the employee could kind of pick one of these working patterns that's most suitable and assign that to them for the purposes of SSP. But I will stick with Monday to Friday for this employee just to keep things simple. So I've removed those other weeks. The pattern start date is all good as well. So I can click OK. I get a little message just to confirm the changes that I've made. I'll click yes to confirm that working pattern, and I'm ready to go and enter this absence now. So as I said, absence diary is one way that you can enter the absence. And even in here, there are a few ways that you can do it. So I can do it by clicking on diary entry just below the calendar. This is going to allow me to choose the absence type. Now this already defaults to SSP and sickness, but you do have different options in there. And then it's just a case of popping in the dates as well, so the from and to dates. So this employee is off sick from the 9th of September to the 20th of September. So I'll pop those dates in. And you can also enter a comment if you wish, and this is going to show on the absence diary or in any detailed SSP reports that you run. So I could pop in that we've received a sick note from them and add that comment. Now when I click OK, we can see straight away it's added that to the absence diary, and it's showing some of those symbols which I showed you earlier. And if I just click on one of those days, for example, we can also see, I've spelt note wrong, but we've got sick note received as the comment there on this absence. So first of all, notice that all of these letters and symbols are lowercase. So this means that it's the current unupdated pay run. We've got 3 X's, which is the waiting days that the employee has to serve before the SSP kicks in, along with the P's as the paid SSP days. So we've got a full week of paid SSP here and 2 days after those 3 waiting days. And then lastly, we've got 2 dashes here. So these are the non-qualifying days, which in this employee's case is the weekend, the Saturday and Sunday. Now it's important to make sure that the sickness is continuous if the employee hasn't returned to work, just to make sure that you've got the 4 or more consecutive days to qualify for SSP. But that is all recorded. And let's say I put in the wrong dates, for example, and I needed to remove that absence. Quick way to do it from here, because it is a current absence, I can left click and drag across these dates and get those highlighted. Right click and click none. And that's going to remove that current absence. So it is a nice quick way to do it. And another quick way of adding that SSP as well. So first of all, we showed the diary entry, but actually you can do it in the same way. So left click and drag on the dates. But this time I'm going to right click, select SSP, and due to sickness, again, I've got the option to add a comment if I wish. And as I click OK, we can see those dates on the absence diary. So nice and quick to do so. So you will see the SSP automatically calculate a little bit later on. But before that happens, I am going to show you the other way of recording sickness, which is via Quick SSP. So for now, I'll save this record, close that, and I'm going to move on to my next employee who's off sick, which is employee number 4. Now, I would recommend the Quick SSP option for initially setting up any sick pay for an employee, whereas the absence diary, which I've just showed you, is great for extending or continuing sickness. So I've highlighted my employee, but this time I'm going to go to the payroll link section and I can see recording sickness. Now something to bear in mind here, this section is, you can move this around a little bit. So if you can't see recording sickness, you might just need to make that section a little bit bigger on the side. But if you still can't find it, you do also have the recording sickness option in employee and just in these tasks, so recording sickness. So this is the same information that you'll be entering. It's just going to be a case of popping in the dates, only this time it is in a slightly different format. So all of the information's on one page. You don't have any different tabs to go through in the record. So let's enter the dates of absence for this employee, which is the 9th of September, but this time to the 18th of September. So not quite as long as the other employee. I'll then just click Calculate Entitlement. And straight away we can see the rest of the screen ungrays, so it was grayed out previously. And we can see the entitlement due at the bottom right there, which is showing actually is the weekly rate of SSP, which is £116.75. We've also got some more information, so the employee's qualifying days, average earnings, which is £461.54. And remember, that has to be above £123 to qualify for SSP. And some more key dates and things as well, so a little bit of extra information. Now, if you do want to check the employee's qualifying days, just click on that on the left-hand side. And you do have the option of changing that in here. Of course, checking the pattern start date as well. And the average earnings figure as well, if you are curious how payrolls work that out. If you click on earnings during a set period, that's going to bring up this window. So this shows the 8 weeks that payrolls use to calculate the average. And across those 8 weeks, we can see this employee's had 2 monthly payments of £2,000, which has got to this average of £461.54. And last thing in here, this is a great option for the quick SSP option, is the print at the bottom left here. So if I click print, I am able to print off a kind of summary of this information, which, as I mentioned before, is just a great way of keeping record of the information that you've inputted. And this is what it'll look like. So you can save that to your computer, print it out, but it's just really handy to have. But let's save this for this employee and just close that window. And if we go back into this employee's record, I just want to show you the absence diary now. So back to the absence tab, because although we didn't record it in the absence diary, we can see it still shows the absence that we've inputted on here with those same letters and symbols. So we've got 3 waiting days, and we've got 5 paid SSP days, and then the 2 days is the weekend, which are non-qualifying days. But now that the SSP is entered for both of those employees, we will pretend that I've done all of the other preparations that I need to, and that I'm ready to process the actual pay run itself. And a quick note with SSP, if you do pay your employees in arrears, more commonly for weekly employees, I would recommend that when you record the sickness, you record the dates for the period that you're actually paying them for, and that way you can pay the SSP in arrears as well. So it should kind of balance out for you. But let me highlight both of those employees, and we'll go to enter payments. So back to payroll tasks and enter payments. I'm going to go across to the SSP tab for this first employee. And again, we've got like a kind of miniature version of the absence diary in here. Got those that absence entered there, so we've got the waiting days and the paid days. And we can also see how much SSP is paying this period. So SSP payable, £163.45 is calculating for them, and 1.4 weeks as well. Now, although they're off for 2 weeks, they did serve those 3 waiting days at the beginning, so it works out to be 1.4 weeks. So each day here is 0.2 of a week. So we've got 1 week here, 1.2, 1.4. And if I just show you my next employee as well, so this is employee number 4, we can see it's showing us 1 week of SSP at the bottom at the weekly rate of £116.75. Now, let's say the employee returned to work, so they came back on this Thursday, Friday, but they actually fell ill again and had to be off a little bit later in the month. So if I highlight these 4 days here, they came back, but then were off again. I can do the same thing as I did in the record, so I can left click and drag the dates and quickly add this absence by going and right clicking, SSP, due to sickness, and clicking OK. Now notice this is a linked period. So because it's within 8 weeks of the last PIW, the employee isn't serving those waiting days again. So this PIW is showing as 4 paid SSP days. So that was to show you what a linked period will look like. So you'll not have those X's with that one. But just to show you another symbol as well, if I just highlight one of these days, right click and click none, you'll see this PIW changes to 3 red A's. Now this is because the period of sickness is less than 4 days, so it doesn't qualify as SSP, and it's just showing as absence. But if I highlight that day again and just quickly add that SSP back on, we can see that changes now to a PIW, and it does qualify for SSP. But I'm just going to remove that for now, so right click and none. So that was recording SSP and just checking that it is calculating and the payments, but we will pop back to the slides and just have a little bit of a recap before we move on to the next section. So statutory sick pay can be recorded via the absence diary, which is either in the employee record or enter payments. Or you can do it via the quick SSP option, which is found in the payroll link section or the employee tasks. Once you have recorded it, you'll see different symbols on the absence diary, lowercase meaning current period, or capital letters meaning historical period or historical sickness. And remember, you will need to set up your employee's working day pattern as well, which will consist of Ns and Qs for non-qualifying and qualifying days. You can then view what's calculating and enter payments, and you do have a miniature version of the absence diary in here where you can edit, extend or delete any current sickness as well. But that does bring us on to the next section of the webinar, which is adjusting your employees' payments to accommodate this statutory payment. So as we've seen, the SSP will calculate automatically, but you will need to make some adjustments to their pay, or you'll probably end up paying their wage plus the SSP, which will be too much. So I'm going to show a few common scenarios that you might come across, but do bear in mind this is very company specific. It does depend on any specific policies that you've got in place, or any specific schemes or anything that you have at the company. So these are just a few common examples. Now, the first option is Makeup Basic, and this is a really good option for companies that might have a specific policy in place for the employee to get their full wage for a certain amount of time, for example. And Makeup Basic allows you to reduce the employee's normal pay as a kind of top up on top of that sick pay. And it just helps to make sure that you don't pay them too much. The next option is a manual adjustment. So this is a good one if you don't have a sick pay scheme or the employees had their entitlement of sick pay, so it's run out. And with this option, you can adjust the payments manually and reduce it to the days or hours that they've worked. And there is a little calculator icon in the enter payment screen which you can use for this. So yeah, we'll go back to the demo and I will show you both of these options. I'll just turn my camera off again. So I'm still in enter payments for both of the employees, which I've added sickness for. First of all, we'll look at employee number 1. So on the payments tab, I can see I do already have their full salary in here. So they're getting a monthly salary of £2,000. But if I go to the summary tab, I can see on the left here, they're getting that £2,000 as normal, but they're actually getting the SSP on top of that. So total gross pay is their normal wage plus SSP, which is too much. So I'm going to use the Makeup Basic option for this employee because they're still covered by the company sick pay scheme at this point. And I do want to top up the sick pay to kind of make it up to their full wage. So for the Makeup Basic option, step 1, you're just going to make sure you've got their full wage in the payments tab as normal. I'm then going to go to the summary tab and click on Makeup Basic. We'll get this window to say that I've selected to make up to basic the statutory payment for this employee. And to do this, the hours or number value of salary, which is the name of my pay element, will need to be reduced. Do I want to continue? And I'll just click yes. And straight away, we can see that total gross pay is reduced to the amount that I've specified, £2,000. And if we go back to the payments tab, it's done this by reducing the hours and number value of my salary pay element. So it's accommodating for that statutory payment that the employee is receiving. So they're now getting a reduced salary, but if we look at this amount here, that's actually the perfect amount to top up this SSP by to get that £2,000. And that is Makeup Basic. And that is actually the adjustment done for my first employee. So it is fairly straightforward to make. The program does the calculations for you. And this is a really good option for employees who are part of a sick pay scheme, which specifies that they receive their full pay for a particular period of time, for example. But let's move on to my next employee as well. So let's assume for this employee, there's actually no sick pay scheme in this scenario. In SSP/parental leave, we've got the 1 week of sick pay, so 5 days of SSP to pay, as it takes away those 3 waiting days. But they were off for a total of 8 working days. But I need to work out how much to pay this employee for the days that they've worked in September. So this payroll is monthly. My process date's the 30th of September. And this particular employee would normally have a total of 21 working days in September. And that's as per their working pattern of Monday to Friday. And bear in mind as well, this may change based on the specific employee's contracted hours or contracted days. But out of those 21 total working days in the pay period, they've worked 13 of them, as they were sick for 8, the 3 waiting days, and the 5 paid SSP days. So the manual adjustment is going to calculate that out of that 21-day period of £2,000, how much of that is going to be 13 days worth. So in the payments tab, again, make sure they've got the full salary in here. Then in the hours and number box, you'll notice this little calculator icon. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to do the days worked, which for this employee is 13, divided by the total working days in the pay period, which for this employee is 21. I'll click equals, and I'll click tab on my keyboard, and we can see the salary is now reduced down to £1,238. So that is the adjustment to the salary, and that's payroll working out how much of their salary is for 13 days pay. And then back to summary, we've got that reduced salary now because of that manual adjustment, plus the week of SSP, and that's how much they're going to be getting paid this month. So I'm happy with those adjustments now. I'm going to move on with the rest of my pay run. So I'll save next and close. And there's just a couple of reports that I would like to just quickly show you, just so you can see how SSP shows on them. So I'll click on pre-update reports. And I've got a couple of my favourites here. So it's just a standard payslip that I'd like to show. And if I preview this, and just make it a little bit bigger, I can see for the first employee, we've got that 1.4 weeks of SSP showing nice and clearly there, along with the amount that payroll worked out to top up the SSP by, and that was the make up basic option that we used. So they're still getting that £2,000 total gross pay. And then if I could just go down, next employee, this was the manual adjustment. So I can see the adjusted salary for the 13 days that they've worked, plus that 1 week of SSP calculated for them. And another one to show you is the payment summary part 1. Now this is just a great report to run in general, really good breakdown, kind of gross to net breakdown for your employees. But again, I'll make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So we've got the 2 employees I'd highlighted, total gross pay this side. And if I just go along here, you can see SSP has its own column, and I can clearly see the 1.4 weeks and the 1 week of SSP that the employees are getting paid, along with the net pay on the right-hand side. And that's the payment summary part 1. I just wanted to show you those quickly, just so you can see what it looks like on the reports, really. But let's go ahead and update the records now. So we'll pretend I've entered the payments for everyone else. We'll highlight everyone now. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Update Records. I always advise taking a backup at this point as well. But I'm just going to click Next, Next, and Finish. And those records have now been updated. So now that they have been updated, I would like to show you some of the symbols on the absence diary, because the period that we've just entered the sickness for is now technically a historical period. So if you go back to the absence tab, we can see those symbols and letters have now changed to capital letters. So they've been updated. And if I just check the next employee as well, that's to reflect that the pay period has been updated and paid. And if we also go into the SSP information here and previous PIW, you'll notice the dates in here have now populated. And this is the previous PIW, so this is used to determine whether the next period of sickness is a linked period or not. And if you are having any problems with SSP calculating, this is a really good screen to come to for troubleshooting as well. So that was adjusting your payments. So there was either the make or basic option or the manual adjustment as well. So the make or basic option is really great for scenarios where you're paying the full wage to the employee, but you want to accommodate for that statutory payment. So you want to top up the SSP to get it up to the normal wage, for example. And you've also got the manual adjustment as well. So this is great for calculating how much an employee is going to be getting for the days worked in a period. And you can find more information on both of these options if you download the handout as well. I've just got some links at the bottom of the slides. But that brings us on to troubleshooting. So you might find that SSP isn't calculating, or the amount of SSP is different to what you're expecting. Now there is a few different factors that can affect how SSP calculates. So I've put together a list of some of the main areas to check. Make sure the information in there is correct, and you should be able to spot the problem and be good to go. So first one is the process date. So remember, SSP pays up to and including the process date. So if all of the dates of sickness are after your process date, there's actually no SSP calculating in the current period, so nothing will calculate until the sickness dates fall before the process date. So that is probably the main thing that catches people out with SSP and with other statutory payments as well. Second thing is the diary entries. So on the absence diary, what letters or symbols are appearing? Because remember, if it's a red A, that means that the sickness is likely less than 4 days and therefore doesn't qualify for SSP. Or if the letters or symbols are capital letters or symbols, they've already been paid and updated, so those dates won't be paid again. And just a reminder of the waiting days as well. So there's 3 waiting days that the employee serves. This could mean that the SSP is showing 3 days less pay than you're expecting because you're not paid for those waiting days, and they show as X's on the diary. We've then got qualifying days. So if the SSP payable, the amount there looks different to what you're expecting, but the dates are correct, it could be that actually the wrong working pattern is assigned to the employee. And you are able to amend that in the record, or you do have the option in the quick SSP option too. Now, if nothing's calculating at all and you've checked all 3 of those things, it could also be the average earnings that's causing the problem, and that's going to be found in the SSP information. So you do need to be earning over an average of £123 a week to qualify for SSP. If they don't, there might not be anything calculating for them. So that could be another reason why. And last main thing that I would check is the previous PIW tab. So this is in the record, in the further information, and it's just the previous PIW tab. So are the details in here correct? Does it reflect what's previously been paid to the employee? Or maybe they've had their entitlement of 28 weeks SSP, because if they have, the sickness would begin to show as W's on the diary, and that means withheld, so it wouldn't actually calculate anything for them. I have linked an article as well at the bottom, a troubleshooting guide on SSP. This is on our help centre, sage.co.uk/help. But it's a really good article to work through if you are having problems with SSP, and it just helps to kind of narrow down and troubleshoot where the problem is and how to fix it as well. So definitely check that out if you are having any issues with SSP. But with that being said, that does bring us onto the last section of the webinar, which is the quiz. So just got a couple of questions to test your knowledge and see what you've learnt. This quiz is going to be some polls that I'll launch to you. You'll select your answer and click submit. You will have about a minute or so to do to answer them, and after that I will share the results along with the correct answer to each question as well. So this is optional, but it would be great for you to all get involved. And let me just launch that first question now. So remember, choose your answer and click submit, and you will have about a minute to do so. Cool. So first question coming to you now is, what is the weekly rate of SSP in the current tax year? So 2024-25. So what is the current weekly rate of SSP? Is it £109.40, £116.75, or £184.03? You might recognise some of those other numbers as well in the answers, which I will explain shortly. But what is the weekly rate of SSP in the current tax year? Fab, I'll just close that now and share the results. Most of you have got that right by the looks of things. Well done, so 98% of you got that correct. It is £116.75. Now you might recognise the other numbers there, so £109.40, that was actually the weekly rate of SSP for the 23-24 tax year, so before it went up in April. And £184.03, that's actually the weekly rate for statutory parental payments, so maternity, paternity pay. And we do actually have webinars coming up on maternity this week and paternity next week as well, so definitely register for those if you'd like to know more about those. But question 2, let me launch that now, is how many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick to form a period of incapacity to work, or a PIW? How many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick to form a period of incapacity to work? Is it 3? Is it 1? Or is it 4? I'll leave that open a couple more seconds there. So how many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick to form a period of incapacity to work? And that looks like most of you have voted now, so I'll close that poll down. That was question 2. And share those results. So 17% of you have said 3, 0% have said 1, which I'm glad about, and 84% have said 4. And the correct answer is 4. So remember that it does have to be 4 or more days to qualify for SSP. Anything less than that, so 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, that will likely show as red A's on the calendar. So it doesn't qualify for SSP, and instead it would just show as absence. So well done to those of you who chose 4. Third question, just launch that now as well, which is, what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? Is it 39, 52, 8, or 12? So what's the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So these are the linked periods I was talking about. Well done, most of you got that right again, so I will close that down and share those results. So 95% of you got that right there, it is 8. Anything more than that, they will have to serve those waiting days again, but if they are off sick again within 8 weeks and it does qualify for SSP, they won't need to serve the waiting days again, so the SSP will just kind of kick in and kind of pay from then. And last question before we go through some further support, I'll just launch that now. So question number 4, which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? So which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? Is it A, P, X, or W? So which of those symbols represents a waiting day? It's kind of a little bit of a trick question, I think, this one, but I'll explain shortly. So which of those represents a waiting day on the absence diary? Great, I'll close that one down as well. I'll share those last results. So this is the last question. 83% of you have said X, 10% of you have said W. So it is an X. It makes sense for it to be a W, to be honest, with it being a waiting day, but that means withheld. So an X is going to be a waiting day. You'll see 3 X's showing on the absence diary before that SSP kicks in. So well done to the 83% of you who said that. And that was our quiz. Just a little bit to test your knowledge, a couple of the kind of key things that we went through there. So well done to those of you who got that right. And thank you for participating as well. But that does bring us to the end of the content for Sick Pay Made Simple in Sage 50 Payroll. I do have some further support to go over as well just before we kind of wrap things up. So starting with some webinars, we do have a lot coming up in September. We've got more on statutory payments. We've got maternity pay, paternity pay, shared parental pay as well. Starting off with some more pensions webinars, and we do have a session on mastering mistakes as well. So this is going to be things like your error corrections, your rollback, restoring backups and things like that. So definitely check those out, sage.co.uk/webinars. Something else to be aware of as well is our one-to-one bespoke training options. So these will be amazing if you're new to payroll in general or new to Sage 50 Payroll. It includes training bundles on admin automation, pensions module and more. So if it is something that you're interested in, head to the link on the handout here or let us know and we will be able to help and get you the support that you need. We've also got the Sage Help Centre as well, so all of the articles and the slides have come from here, and that's just sage.co.uk/help. You can access loads of different support guides on here, demonstration videos, you can get access to our webinar recordings and things as well. And if you do need to get in touch for any technical support, you do have the contact options too. And then last but not least is sageu.com, so Sage University. So on here, you can set up a free account, you can access e-learning, bite-sized learning and earn product certification as well. So a great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll and other Sage products as well. But that has brought us to the end of our Sick Pay Made Simple webinar. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm aware I've ran over a little bit with that quiz, but hopefully it was worth doing. So I can still see quite a lot of questions in the questions panel coming through. So I will go on mute just to help Duncan with those shortly. But for those of you who are leaving us now, just a little reminder, you can download the handouts from the session. These are going to include all of the slides that we've gone through, any of the further support that we've linked on them as well. And last thing as well, there is going to be a little short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. If you do have just a minute to fill that out, I would really, really appreciate that. We do read all of the feedback. It really does go a long way. So if you do have a moment to fill that out, that would be fantastic. But for now, yes, I'm going to go on mute just for a few moments just to help Duncan. I can see it is quite busy on the questions panel. We'll do our very, very best to make it through all of these before we run out of time. But hopefully you've found some of those questions and answers useful. So give me a few minutes and I will be back to wrap things up. Hello there, everyone. That's just me back again. Thank you to those of you who've stuck around till now. Quite a lot of questions to get through there, so thank you so much for sending them in. And a massive thank you as well to Duncan behind the scenes. You've definitely kept him busy for the last hour. So yeah, that does bring us to the end of the webinar. Do keep an eye on your emails for a recording of the session coming through. Feel free to rewatch that as many times as you need to. You'll have all of the demonstrations and things on there as well. It will also be available on the recordings article too, sage.com/webinars. That'll show you the upcoming sessions. A couple of you have asked about those and all of the recordings as well to previous sessions that we've done, including National Payroll Week, which was last week. So if you didn't get the chance to attend those, definitely check out the recordings. We had some really interesting sessions, a little bit of the history of some of the topics surrounding payroll as well. But yeah, that's enough from me today. So hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day. We'd love to see one another webinar in the not so distant future, so definitely get yourself registered for those. But on behalf of me and Duncan, we will see you next time. It's goodbye for now.